Alrighty, guys. Well, now that we're a little more calm, cool, and collected, at least compared to the immediate reaction to Daredevil Born Again episodes 5 and 6, let's talk about it in a little more detail, shall we? As we do every week with these big shows, let's talk about Daredevil Born Again. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion, so if you have not seen Daredevil Born Again episodes 5 and 6, no worries. Just make sure to save this segment, save the podcast, save whatever medium you're watching or listening to this for later. And then once you have seen the episodes, come back and join us, and we'll be talking about Daredevil Born Again episodes 5 and 6. Or if you just don't care about spoilers, no problem at all. Welcome in, and let's get going. So, as I mentioned in my immediate reaction, I'm not going to lie. It's taken a little bit for me to kind of articulate this to myself, and then I think to the audience as well. I don't think I'm loving this show. Now, I say this, I'm not somebody who hates it, right? I've seen there's been this weird polarizing effect where, lo and behold, what a shocker that the internet is polarized about something related to a big franchise. Some people seem to really love the show, and some people seem to really hate the show. And for me, I'm, as usual, not really in either camp. I am somewhere where I like a decent bit of what I'm seeing, but it's not clicking for me. And as I mentioned in my immediate reaction, I think maybe a part of it is that I'm watching the original show concurrently, and the original show is just, to me at least, so clearly on a different level. And part of the reason is, and we'll talk about this especially as it pertains to episode 5, which I strongly believe is majority what was in the original show with the episode by episode legal procedural. And it was honestly the last scene in this episode that cemented it for me. But there are a lot of other things in there as well we'll talk about. But I think what it is for me is that Daredevil seasons 1 through 3, right? Every episode was decently self-contained. And it's not like there weren't subplots, there weren't mini arcs that were going on throughout the entire season. Of course, I just started season 2. And Punisher, right? The Punisher is not, Punisher is throughout the season, but, there are a lot of other things that happen in season 2, like Elektra and the Hand, and I think Kingpin comes back a little bit later. But episodes 1 through 3 are very Punisher focused, right? But each episode flows into one another. And I think the original idea for the show, and I understand now why they pivoted, right? Because they probably looked at it and went, this isn't what Daredevil was. And granted, they didn't, scrap everything. They kept a decent bit of it. I think all of episode 5, or the vast majority of it, was kept from the original concept. But I think the original concept, it became clear to me, was just episode by episode, let's just do a little adventure of the week with Daredevil, and then maybe something happens at the end of the show. And while it's not bad, it just isn't as good as what the original show is, in my opinion. So, I think that's part of the reason why the show is not clicking for me, because a lot of these episodes feel like they're meandering a little bit. And I feel like a lot of the subplots as well, I'm not clicking with them as much as I feel like I want to. And, we'll talk about it when we get to the very last scenes of this episode, or of these episodes, episode 6, because the ending of episode 6, my goodness. But, people might ask me, well, okay, but it's all in service of build-up, right? Because you can't just, have Daredevil be Daredevil the whole season. It's about him rediscovering who he is, and Kingpin, acquiescing to his darker nature. And so you got to build up to it, right? Don't just complain. It's slow. I get that. I totally get that. You've got to build it up. But honestly, I feel like the build-up itself was not super interesting. And when we get to the last bits of episode 6, I'm like, yes, but not because I'm like, oh, it's so earned, but because it's just good to see them, or good to see Daredevil. He's back to being Daredevil, and Kingpin, you're like, okay, this is the Kingpin that I knew and not loved, but hated, but loved to hate, and it feels more like me as somebody who loved the original series saying, oh my gosh, we're back to this, rather than me saying, oh, Daredevil Born Again, what a great build up to this return to Daredevil, if that makes sense. We'll get there. So let's start out with episode 5, and we'll go into episode 6. Episode 5 being the Yusuf Khan, Kamala Khan's dad episode. I really thought at the end of the episode, when he says, let's go to dinner, that we were going to see Kamala Khan, but she's off in California, Young Avengers-ing, it would appear. And so that's an interesting connection. And also episode 6 has an interesting MCU connection as well, which we knew about before, but we'll, again, touch on that in just a second. So episode 5 starts out. It is St. Patrick's Day in New York. And we get to see, right away, Kamala Khan's father, Yusuf Khan. So there he is. And he mentions right away that Kamala is visiting California, visiting some friends. So obviously that's some Young Avengers, wink and blink and you'll miss it kind of thing. I think that Yeah, last time we saw Kamala Khan, she was still in New York though, because I think Kate Bishop was still in New York. So maybe she's going to visit Cassie Lang. That probably is the implication of where she and probably Kate are as well. So that's kind of fun. But yeah, the actor who plays Kamala Khan's dad, he has such a charm to him, and I really like him, the character at least, because I know I heard some things about the actor, and I don't want to get into any of that right now, but I just, as a character, I think that he's great. Just the natural charm and good naturedness. Everyone still remember that scene in episode 1 or 2 of Miss Marvel where he dresses up as the Hulk and tries to really, endear himself to his daughter. And he's so proud of Kamala Khan. He's so proud of Miss Marvel. I love that. And I think this is this MCU connection totally works. It's totally fun. Does it feel a little forced? Maybe. Maybe because, what in the world are the chances that Daredevil runs into him in the bank? But it's still good to see him. So apparently Matt Murdock is trying to get a loan because their law firm is trying to expand as well. And then these Irish gang members basically come and try to rob the bank. And I wondered if there was going to be any connection to the Irish gang that Punisher took out at the beginning of season 2. Again, very top of mind for me as I'm watching season 2. But doesn't look like they mentioned anything like that in this episode. So Matt then decides he leaves the bank, but he hears the robbers, and he decides to walk back in. And look, even for Matt Murdock, that is a little bit bold because, he's not wearing his Daredevil costume, and these are guns. And Matt Murdock against a bunch of guns, I don't know. But again, it's Matt Murdock, and we know he's going to be okay. So I just thought it was interesting. Matt Murdock walking straight into a gunfight. And poor Mr. Khan, he's being forced to open the bank vault because he is the assistant to the bank manager, for those of you who get that reference. So yeah, I think that, it's a gutsy move by Matt, but he's still trying to be a hero, still trying to be a good guy, even without the Daredevil costume. So then we get to this back and forth between the lead Irish guy, I don't even remember his name, and the detective outside, Angie Kim. This was one of the strangest things I've ever seen. This just flat out did not work for me. It was, I'm not going to say it was cringy. I don't know if it was cringy or not, but this, whatever this was going on, tell me a joke. And she tells him a joke. And this back and forth of, hey, I don't have all day, where's my stuff? I was sitting there going, what are we doing here? Like, this is part of the show. I think in episode 4, there were some things in there that I just really didn't like either. Because it's not like the Vanessa Kingpin subplot, which to me, I get what they're going for there. It's not clicking with me. BB Urich, same thing. I get what they're going for. Not clicking with me super well. This whole thing, this little back and forth, that drags out for at least 5 minutes of screen time in this episode. What was that? I just really, let me know in the comments. Am I the only one who thought this was the most bizarre set of sequences that they just dragged on? Like these two characters were just talking for 5 minutes, and the whole joke scene was just, my gosh, that was weird. And look, I have to say, if their idea of gritty and grounded, if their idea of that is the characters saying the F word a bunch of times, that's not what gritty and grounded is. Like, they don't have to curse at all for it to be, reminiscent of the original show. And just because these Irish guys are saying the F word all the time in this episode, and just because, again, later on Matt says the F word, which, it's in a different context, but just because they insert that word into the dialogue every, not even once in a while, pretty often, it doesn't make the show any better or any worse. It makes it feel like it's trying too hard. So I was just annoyed by a lot of those little things that were going on here. I will admit that most of this hostage sequence, though, was fairly tense and decent. And look, the Irish guys, for the most part, were really silly. And the fact that they even let Matt use the restroom, even that was really ridiculous and really silly. Also, the fact that Mr. Khan has so much trust in a man, in Matt Murdock, that he's never met before, but Matt's like, oh, can you just stall and risk your entire life? You might get shot. Again, I know that's not the intention of the episode, but these are just little things that I was picking up on throughout the episode. But still, and I also didn't have Matt speaking in an Irish accent, Charlie Cox speaking in an Irish accent on my bucket list for today, but on my bingo card, but there it is. He did it. And so, I think that there are just some little things in this episode that kind of cue you into the fact that this is just sort of a lighter, breezier episode that just doesn't feel super weighty. That makes sense. I did like, though, Matt cracking open the safe. I think that is a really interesting use of his powers. I don't remember if he explicitly did this in any of the first 3 seasons of Daredevil, but I did like that. It's a really good use of his powers. I believe he did something similar at one point, but I can't be sure as well. But yeah, the episode feels very episodic, and it, some of the things are very, very silly. So anyways, we have this whole thing. So I guess the way that this connects to the overarching story is that these guys are working for some kind of boss, who I'm assuming is going to be Vanessa, although based on what happens with Kingpin in episode 6, it could be Kingpin, but who knows? And maybe it's Muse, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it's Muse. I do like Matt using his wits, though, to get through most of this. And then he gets in a swipe, as he's escaping with the smoke in the bank, and he gets in a swipe at one of the guards. So, again, it's a fun and cute little scene here. And then you see Matt Murdock going after the guy. And again, this is the thing where, for episode 4, right, the vast majority of episode 4, I was like, yeah, it's just kind of going. And then, bam, it hits you. Right, it really hits you. Episode 2, similar thing. Yeah, the episode was going, and then bam, the ending action sequence, and Matt going after the guy, and that leg kick. Oh my gosh, that leg kick! I literally gasped. I know we've seen it in the trailers, but seeing it in the context of the show and seeing just the full force of it, I gasped. I was like, whoa! Oh my gosh, that was crazy. So then we get a closing of this episode where he meets Mr. Khan again. And they're talking, let's get dinner, and I hope that gets paid off at some point in Miss Marvel Season 2, maybe. He also pays off that line from Spider-Man No Way Home where he says he's a really good lawyer, which is fun. I enjoy that. So it feels like, again, a decent episode to a different kind of show. And the way that I really feel like this was just part of a completely different show was the ending. Because the ending was totally that, in Looney Tunes, anyone watch Looney Tunes or Tom and Jerry, where the last little thing in the episode is a little gag or a little joke, and the camera just kind of pans in with a circle spotlight as the rest of the screen fades to black on the main character, and he kind of winks at the screen, and then it goes to black, right? Curtains close. I don't know if anybody gets that or if anyone can visualize what I'm talking about there. That's exactly what I got from this last scene here, where, Matt's like, oh, let me just eat one of these candies, wink, wink, and then he leaves, and then Mr. Khan picks up the diamond in the candy bowl, and it literally almost is like that, da-da-da-da-da-da, and like the episode ends there. And to me, that is really symbolic of what I think the original concept of the show was. And look, it's not terrible, right? It's not terrible. It's just not Daredevil. And it just also, even in the context of this show, right, it doesn't feel that consequential. I get it that later, right, in episode 6, let's transition in episode 6, which is a Muse-centric episode. Also Swordsman, shout out Swordsman, who we see Jack Duquesne later on, which I have some questions about. But again, we'll get to that later. But again, I get that we have this whole sequence at the beginning, which by the way, I love whenever they bring up Matt's Catholic side, where he's praying over the picture of Foggy. I think that's great, right? I think that he sees flashbacks to his violent nature in the past few episodes, and I get that. I don't know if this was a function of this just, not being the plan originally, and they just didn't reshoot it or whatever. But in those moments, though, right, where in the moment, I mean, in episode 2, he screams, right, and that you kind of feel that. But in episode 4, or episode 5, excuse me, where he's going after that Irish guy, and he commits that, he becomes violent again. There's no remorse, right? It's just cut to the next scene. And so yes, you can have him cutting back to him those sequences, but they don't have weight to them, right? Because it's only in these flashback moments where you're like, oh, I guess he's thinking about them. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Something that I was thinking about. So anyways, you get some scenes here where Luca is talking to Kingpin. Luca, I think, is the guy, one of the leaders of the gang, the crime family or the crime people that Vanessa is dealing with, and he owes Kingpin money. 1.8, something about 1.8 and 2.8. Honestly, I don't really know what they're talking about here. And then we have intercut with that Heather talking about vigilantes, very, very, very pointed. And we get Kingpin finally getting wind of what Muse is doing, painting the murals with blood here, and he paints one with Kingpin, which is interesting. And so we get hints here that with the kidnappings going on, and they're all connected to Muse at some point. Then we get some scenes with Hector Ayala's niece, Angela, I believe it's Angela. I'm of two minds of this. I mean, I get what she's saying, do something about it. Obviously, it gets her kidnapped, so she, was being way too rash about it. And also, what does she expect Matt to do, really? She doesn't know he's Daredevil. I mean, of course, that's the inciting incident to him becoming Daredevil again. But what does she know? To me, it was a little bit ridiculous of her being like, what, do something, or else I'm going to do something. And I'm like, he's a lawyer. He's a blind lawyer, though. Anyways. And I wish, I said this again last episode, I wish we got more time with her. She just kind of randomly appeared last episode, and then she kind of randomly appears again in this episode, and she becomes kind of the linchpin of why Matt becomes Daredevil again. So, I don't know. It's just something that I wish we got a little bit more screen time with. So, anyways, we have some more scenes with Muse. He is terrifying. We'll get to him in just a little bit. And then we get Jack Duquesne, who's talking to Kingpin, who's at this, fancy party, talking about port expansion. And I have questions about this. From what we saw at the end of Hawkeye, Jack Duquesne, escaped everything, and then that's all great and fine. And Eleanor Bishop went to jail. Eleanor Bishop, who was working with Kingpin, I don't think Jack Duquesne ever interacted with Kingpin, so I don't think he knew specifically that that Eleanor Bishop was working for Kingpin. That being said, I like that. That's my question. Really, is how much does he actually know? Because he's face to face with the guy who his ex-fiance was working for, this crime boss, and so I don't know. It's a little interesting, but yeah, I mean, it's an interesting connection. Jack Duquesne back here again, and so finally, then we start getting the formation of this anti-vigilante task force, which from set photos from season 2 looks like it's going to be a big part of season 2. The Ayala niece, Angela, gets kidnapped here, and there we go. Matt is back to being Daredevil. I wish he was a little more conflicted about putting the cowl back on instead of... Honestly, that's my one gripe with that scene, is where he just says F it, and I'm like, is it just F it, though, when it's, the reason you're not Daredevil is Foggy, right? I mean, your best friend died, so it felt a little too flippant to me, to be quite honest with you, but again, you kind of get where he's coming from, and he knows he has to save Angela and Muse. Muse is just so scary. Muse is like, watching these scenes where Muse is taking Angela's blood is the same feeling I had when you see Kingpin for the first time in Daredevil season 1, and he's just bashing the guy's head in with the car door, and it's just like that level of frightening. And it's crazy. It's crazy. And then Kingpin, where you see Kingpin going to the cell with Adam. And speaking of terrifying Kingpin, he's back. So I've been saying this entire season that Kingpin is just not scary anymore. But then you get little hints here and there, right? The end of last episode, I think, ended with Kingpin eating dinner in front of Adam's cell, which was terrifying, really scary. And then we get full Kingpin. He is so back. And Daredevil is so back. And they're both like, this sequence here is, again, I don't love violence in I'm talking specifically about in film and in media and in cinema specifically. Obviously, real world violence, condemn it. It's atrocious. But just talking about in terms of narrative storytelling, I'm not generally a big fan of on screen violence, but the narrative purpose behind this kind of violence is it's what these characters have been building towards, their inner natures, the Daredevil inside Matt Murdock and the Kingpin inside of Wilson Fisk, and they finally let it out, the darker natures, and the editing behind this sequence is so incredibly well done, to where you're intercutting between the two, and you can feel like these are the characters being let out in their full form. It's brutal. The Kingpin beating up Adam is exactly back to the Kingpin we know. This is what the season was building up to. I love the juxtaposition. Again, I wish the build-up felt a little more linear, because it feels like we were just jumping around a little bit too much in the first 5 episodes, where, yeah, like last episode, there was no hint that Matt Murdock was even thinking about Foggy. And that's what I said last episode for the episode 4 spoiler discussion. I was like, I wish that Matt would think about Foggy every once in a while. And I love the beginning of episode 6 where he is, right? And again, I get it. It probably had to do with the retooling of the season and whatnot. And I get it. But still, I really, it's incredible. The last juxtaposition of the episode. So we had an episode 7, and I hope that this season is finally going to sharpen up here. We're going to see Punisher again. We've seen those set photos and the trailers of the actual Punisher, so we know that. And the question becomes, where are we heading? The anti-vigilante task force, they're going after Muse. Kingpin is, well, I mean, I don't know if he's back. Like, to Vanessa, he'll probably still be just kind of the I'm trying, I'm being a good husband. And Matt Murdock, we'll see where it leaves him now that he's officially put the Daredevil costume back on. Is he going to be remorseful, or is he going to be full Daredevil again? Who knows? But like I said, this season has not been the smoothest ride for me. I don't love certain things in certain episodes. I I'm not super thrilled with certain subplots, but when they get the show right, you see the show. I see Daredevil, the show, in Daredevil Born Again. And when it works, it just works so well. So I'm hopeful, and more hopeful than ever, honestly, for Daredevil Born Again Season 2, where they have everything, they have the recipe for success, and they just have to execute it. And easier said than done, obviously, easier said than done. But I have hope, right? I really have hope that they're going to be able to get it right. And I think that they're setting up a great end to the season, so hopefully as long as the season ends well, then it'll be great. Guys, what did you think of Daredevil Born Again episodes 5 and 6? Did you enjoy them? Did you love them both? Or did you like one, not the other? Did you dislike them both? Totally fine. Let me know in the comments and we can have a discussion about it. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below.